How can a life, a life measured in moments, truly connect with a reality that is eternal? It's a question that sits right at the very heart of faith. And today, we're going to explore two profoundly different answers to how our world of time can meet the world of eternity.
So, here's the path we'll walk together. We'll begin with two distinct visions of eternity. Then, we'll explore this beautiful idea of building a palace in time and contrast that with the concept of opening portals to power. That will lead us to a direct comparison, and finally, to a really crucial question about the very nature of holiness.
You see, many traditions teach that eternity isn't just some far-off destination. It's a reality that can actually break into our present experience. However, the paths to that meeting point and the very reason for seeking it, well, they can be fundamentally different.
To help us understand these diverging paths, let's turn to our two guides. First, we have the brilliant Jewish philosopher and theologian, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Hessel. And second, we have the charismatic Christian teacher, Dr. Rennie McLean. Each of them offers a compelling, yet deeply contrasting, vision for how we can touch the eternal.
Let's begin with the poetic, really profound framework of Rabbi Heschel. For him, the key, the absolute center, is the sanctification of time itself. Now, at the very core of Heschel's thought is this idea of an architecture of time. He argues that our greatest cathedrals aren't built of stone in the realm of space. No, they are constructed out of sacred moments. For him, the Sabbath is nothing less than a palace built in time.
Heschel draws this really sharp distinction between two ways of existing. On one hand, you've got the realm of space. This is the material world. It's defined by our drive to conquer, to acquire, to possess things. He even calls it the tyranny of things. But then, on the other hand, there is the realm of time, which calls us to a totally different way of life, one of sanctity, of harmony, of simply to be. This quote really captures the essence of his whole philosophy. For Heschel, entering sacred time requires a deliberate retreat from our obsession with mastering the physical world. It's a fundamental shift in our very mode of being. So what's the ultimate purpose of entering this palace in time? Well, it's to experience what's called menuha. And this isn't just, rest from work. It's a deep, resonant peace, a harmony with God, with other people, and with all of creation. It's a state of true spiritual communion. Now, let's turn to a profoundly different framework. Dr. Rennie McLean, coming from a charismatic Christian perspective, also sees a medium between time and eternity, but he describes it in terms of power and divine action. It's a very different feel.
The central concept in Dr. McLean's teaching is the portal. He looks at specific biblical set times, things like the feasts in Leviticus, and he sees them as divine appointments. In his view, these moments literally function as open gates to heaven, allowing the eternal realm to invade our temporal one. And right here, the purpose is just strikingly different from Heschel's. The goal isn't to retreat from the world for rest. No, it's to access supernatural power for the world. It is to see miracles, signs, and wonders manifest in our physical reality, to bring divine provision right into our material circumstances. This invitation from Dr. McLean is so direct, so dynamic. He's describing a state where the normal rules of earthly time just dissolve, and a higher eternal reality takes over, empowering the believer to act.
So this brings us to a direct comparison. And while both frameworks see this meeting of time and eternity, their foundational purpose and their method, well, they diverge at every single key point.
First, let's just consider their purpose. For Heschel, the goal is communion and peace. For McLean, it's all about accessing power to change reality. Second, look at their relationship to the material world. Heschel calls for a retreat from the tyranny of things, while McLean teaches a command over it, where you can literally speak to matter and it must obey. And finally, their method. Heschel's path is one of intentional rest and being. McLean's path, however, requires an active faith in the here and now to pull the eternal right into the present. Now, while Heschel's work is, of course, deeply admired, a thorough look requires us to consider certain theological critiques. These come particularly from Christian scholars who question some of the biblical underpinnings of his framework. The first critique really centers on the very source of holiness. Heschel makes this statement that man is the source of holiness.
However, theologians push back and argue that biblically, all holiness comes exclusively from God. They point out that Scripture commands humans to remember and to guard the Sabbath's holiness, which God already established, not to create it themselves.
A second critique looks at this idea of innate holiness. Heschel seems to suggest that humanity has some kind of inherent holiness that just needs to be awakened. Christian theology, however, maintains that the New Testament doesn't teach this. Instead, it holds that holiness is something received only through the mediation of Jesus the Messiah. The third critique challenges Heschel's really sharp division between time and space. While Heschel elevates time as the primary place for holiness, scholars note that the Old Testament frequently calls physical places and things holy, from the holy ground at the burning bush to all the objects in the sanctuary. This has led some to suggest that Heschel's focus on time might be in part a product of his own historical context, writing after the holy space of the temple was no longer accessible.
Therefore, the final assessment from these critics is that while Heschel's work is profoundly inspiring and beautiful, it functions more as a powerful work of Jewish philosophy than it does as a strict, systematic biblical theology.
And so, we're left with two very distinct paths. One leads to a sanctuary in time, a place of rest and of peace. The other leads to a portal of power, a gateway for action and command. Sanctuary or power?
One path seeks sanctuary, the other seeks power, and both are profound attempts to bridge our finite world with the infinite. The question that remains for us, then, is how do we choose to seek the eternal in the landscape of our own time?